So, I really want to bring you into your heart before we start this. I hope it's okay with everyone, but I really would just like everybody here in the audience, in the panel, anybody listening online, please just close your eyes for 1 minute, not even a minute. We're going to put our left hand over our heart chakra. We're going to close our eyes and we're just going to feel connected into our own hearts. Breathe into your heart chakra and see it open up. And now feel that open to the person on your right, to the person on your left, the person in front of you, the person behind you, the people in your street, the people in your village or town or city, the people in your country, the people in the world. We are connected heart to heart. Thank you. I'm ready now. So my talk tonight, I want to share with you some strategies that I use to take me from trauma. As Lou said, trauma, domestic abuse, mental ill health, addiction, sexual abuse. I mean, it just goes on. I grew up in a very traumatic way in a family that did its absolute best, and I have forgiven both my parents and all the generations before because I know that they did their best. But me as a child growing up, it was really hard because I was a really sensitive child. I'm a creative. We feel for the universe. We feel for the family. Everything that goes on in these dysfunctional families, we take it on board to feel it. But that's what made me a creative. So today I can thank them for that. At the time, though, it was really difficult. And Gabor Mate, who is a absolute brilliant guy working with trauma and addiction, he says all addictions are attempts to escape the deep pain of the hurt child. And that really resonates with me because I was that hurt child. And as I grew older, I became more and more dysfunctional. I started drinking, taking drugs, I had violent relationships, I put myself into chaotic situations, dangerous situations. At 21, I was sat in a room being told, you are the future of this country. By 22, I was sat in the middle of Stonehenge, bombed out of my brain, thinking that I'd made it. Thinking, this is it, my life started. I'm putting 2 fingers up to society. But it was because I couldn't do normal society. And all of that hedonism, all of that putting 2 fingers up, put it in the box there if you understand what I'm talking about. We hurt ourselves by putting substances and taking actions and behaviors that hurt us, thinking that we were having fun and putting 2 fingers up to society, when actually I couldn't cope with my trauma. I couldn't cope with the alcoholism of my parents. I couldn't cope with my mum's mental illness. I couldn't cope with my own addictions that were there, as Gabor Mate said, to try and escape that pain of the hurt child. And the violent relationships, all they did was match my outside to my inside. Because inside I had no self-worth, no self-esteem. I walked around for years. I was, for years, an itinerant hippie. My hair was long and black. You couldn't see my face. I didn't look in a mirror for 3 years. I was that disconnected from me, from who I could potentially be. All I could feel, I was my hurt, I was my pain, and I did anything I could to alter my mood, to cope with that pain. And what happened? I got into recovery 24 years ago. That was the first stage. And that I carried on in that. I'm still in recovery. I haven't had a drink, a drug, or anything mood altering in 24 years. And that was the first thing that needed to happen. But after that, I then had to look at the addictive relationships. I wasn't in violent relationships anymore, but I did marry a narcissist who was mentally violent towards me. So I knew that there was more work to do. And then 4 years ago, I was living in Spain and I heard a man on YouTube talking about positive psychology. And he was saying that up until when he took over as the president of the Psychology Association, all psychology did for all those years prior to that was look at how do we get people from -7 to 0? How do we, what are the psychopathologies that we need to deal with, usually through either talk therapy or drugs, that we can help get them to 0? And he said, what about instead we focus on 0 to +7? That was the birth of positive psychology, even though some people had been doing stuff in that field before. He crystallized it into positive psychology, which is the study of well-being. What makes human beings amazing? What makes us able to connect with each other, to live our best lives, to write books that touch people, to be incredible athletes or speakers or anything? And he wanted to study the things that help to make human beings better. And he talked about 4 different things. He said we are hardwired for fear. Our ancestors back in cave people time, they had to run or hide or freeze really quickly if there was a saber-toothed tiger coming round the corner. There was no time for, ooh, do you think I should, or maybe, or, you know, that stuff had to happen immediately. We are hardwired. Our brains, the amygdala at the back here, fight, flight, freeze. That was the first part of the brain that developed. And that's the part of the brain that helps us to be alive, to be here, to be able to react positively to fearful situations that keep us alive. Along with that is the negativity bias. Our brains are wired to look for not just the fear, not just where's it coming, what's round the corner, but also what's wrong. What's wrong in our lives? What's wrong with our day? What's wrong with that person? What's wrong with me? That voice, internal, especially when you've come from trauma, that internal, not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. And then he said, we're also hardwired for connection. I connect to you, you connect to them, we all connect to each other. Because if our ancestors hadn't been able to do connection, then we wouldn't be here, because they needed each other to survive what happened. So connection is also hardwired into us. And that comes instead of the sympathetic nervous system, which is the amygdala, fight, flight or freeze. It's the parasympathetic, which includes the vagus nerves that goes down the body. And that's the parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. And he talked about the fact that we can go from a state of learned helplessness. Pranash talked about it. That was going to be one of my slides. And I thought, I don't need the slide, I'll just talk. Where they put the stake in the ground and the baby elephant didn't move. And as it grew, they took the stake and the chain away, and the elephant, as it grew, still didn't move. And that's learned helplessness. And that's what when we grow up in families, traumatic families and situations, we learn, I can't do anything to change my mum. I can't do anything to stop my dad from drinking or getting violent. I can't do anything to stop my head or to, do anything different to make a different outcome. There is nothing. And then the thing that got me excited was he said, you can learn to rewire your brain. You can learned optimism. And let me tell you that as a person who suffered complex PTSD, trauma, social anxiety, my whole life, you wouldn't believe it today meeting me, but believe me, even 2 years ago, I couldn't be in groups of people. I went to my first weekend for my master's degree in positive psychology. And I was pulling my hair out, going, oh my God, 40 people in a room. I can't do it. I was literally having a panic attack and wanting to run out the room because of that trauma, where I'm terrified of what people will think about me, the anxiety that goes along with that, and the low self-esteem and the negative voices. So I learned some techniques, and I learned that I can do certain things to rewire my brain and restart my life. I am 60 years young today. I've got more energy, more passion, more purpose today than I had in my 30s, my 40s, and my 50s. I promise you, whoever you are, wherever you are in that struggle, you can rewire your brain, and you can go on and have real connections with yourself, your source, and other people. Because that's what happens in the trauma. At age 4, when the sexual abuse started, I left my body and I lost my connection to source and to myself. And it's taken me to the age of 60 to be able to stand in my body, in my power, and go, I'm here. And I've rewired, and I continue to rewire my brain. So what are the things that I did? Number 1, daily meditation. I've been, as I say, in recovery 24 years. So I've done meditation and prayer every day for 24 years. But I upped it to a whole different level. I learned self-compassion meditation because I needed to be compassionate to me. Because I could be compassionate to everyone else. I was a complete people pleaser, a codependent. But I needed to be compassionate to me. I needed to learn loving kindness meditation so that the love that I was growing for myself, I could send out into the world like we did at the start of this talk. I needed to continue on with my growth mindset, going to university at the age of 58 to do a master's, part of my growth mindset. I am looking always for the solutions to the problems of me that came from that traumatic place. And there are solutions. And I want to teach those solutions to other people that come from a similar place. And then I developed daily gratitude, What am I thankful for? My God, I'm thankful for still being on the planet. I honestly did not think I would make it to 30 because of all the drugs, because of all the alcohol, because of all the dangerous, violent relationships. It wasn't one, it was many, and many dangerous situations. Because I learned that I was addicted to chaos and to excitement. Because I didn't value me. I didn't value my life. I didn't value any part of me. But I do today. And I did the whole thing around the forgiveness and the journaling through that process of forgiveness. Because, as we know, when we point a finger at somebody else, the other four, well, three and a thumb, are pointing back at me. And it's like pouring poison in a cup and drinking from that cup myself. I don't do that to me anymore. I let go. I look for what's good in my life. And the last thing I did was start a mindfulness and a daily savouring. Savouring is just, if I'm sitting there having a cup of tea, instead of being off doing a shopping list or, or going on a walk and thinking about everything else instead of being present, I bring my mind to bear on the present moment, because that present moment is the moment that can change everything else. It changes the past because I'm no longer living there. And it changes the future because it gives me options that I never had. Choices, because I'm now using my prefrontal cortex, not my amygdala. I'm thinking, I'm reasoning, I'm coming from a place of calm, not panic, chaos, and anxiety. How would you feel if you were able? Please put it in the chat box. What difference would it make to your life if you continue to rewire your brain with these and many other things that I have learned along the way, both from recovery and from my master's in positive psychology? What difference would it make to your relationships with yourself, with your partners, your parents, your children, your work? Imagine if this went into workplaces and people spoke to each other from kindness and compassion and forgiveness and treated each other well. It would make a huge difference, absolutely. This is what's possible. So I'll finish with this. We may not be responsible for the world that created our mind, but we can take responsibility for the mind which creates our world. That is Gabor Mate. I'm going to say it once more because it's so important. We may not be responsible for the world that created our minds, but we can take responsibility for the mind which we create our world with. If you want to change your mind so that you can change your life, your past, your present, and your future, to have increased joy and connection with yourself and others and source, whatever that means to you, please reach out to me.